Hello everyone, welcome to Brandy's Cards. I am so excited to be here with you. I have another beginner series video. So we're going to talk about heat embossing. Have you ever heat embossed before? It just creates this beautiful element to your card. Now I've received several emails from many of you that said, okay, I just need a, heat embossing 101. So I'm really excited to be here and I'm going to show you all of the things that you need just to get started, right? Just to get started heat embossing with your heat tool, your embossing powder, paper, and a rubber stamp. But then I'm also going to show you some fun additional items. I call them luxury items. Now, you don't need them to get started by any stretch. But, if you really enjoy heat embossing as much as I have and many others, then you might want to add those to your collection. So I'm going to show you those items as well. So we're going to dive right in. We are going to pull out our heat tool and we're going to get embossing. And I hope that I inspire you to go into your craft room, grab some paper, grab some stamp set, some embossing powder, and just get melting away, get heating away. So let me show you the things that you're going to need to get started. So to get started with your heat embossing, you're going to need a heat tool. So this is our Stampin' Up! Heat tool. And it's fantastic. Now, many folks have said, well, can I use a hairdryer? No, it doesn't get hot enough. So you definitely need a heat tool. It's also known as a heat gun, embossing gun. Basically what it does is it melts the powder so that you get that beautiful embossed look. Now you're also going to need some embossing powder. I have copper here, I have gold, and I also have silver. So Stampin' Up! Has their embossing powders. Let me just show you in the catalog where those are at. You're going to turn to page 128, and you're going to see that our embossing powders are right here. They're item number 4, and you can buy them in a pack of 3. So you can get the basics, which are black, clear, and white, or you can get the metallics, which are copper, gold, and silver. So that's what I have here, and this is the 2022 and 23 Stampin' Up! Annual Catalog. So in the event that you find this video maybe a year from now and you're like, okay, so those are not the right pages, well, that's why. Because you might have a newer catalog or maybe one that is retired. Okay, so you can see that we have our embossing powders. So let me show you what it looks like. Yeah, it's just little powder that's in there, okay? And so this one is the gold. So you're gonna need some embossing powder. And the embossing powder is going to melt down during the heating process, and it's gonna reveal that beautiful, glossy, raised impression. Okay, so what else are you gonna need? You're gonna need some Versamark. So here's our Versamark. Now I did do a beginner series video on Versamark and on our inks, okay? So this is a resist ink or a pigment ink. It creates that tone-on-tone look when you stamp it onto cardstock. Yeah, so I'll show you that here in just a minute, but it creates that tone-on-tone, but it also is quite sticky, very sticky. You probably can't see the shine on my finger, but it is very sticky, and it's most commonly used with embossing powders. So that one you will absolutely need, all right? Then you're gonna need a rubber stamp, yeah. So these are actually in the luxury items, so I'm gonna pull those guys out. But you're gonna need a rubber stamp and you are going to need a piece of paper. So that's what you need to get started embossing, yeah. So that's the basics. That is totally the basics. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you a few additional items and then we're gonna get embossing and I'm gonna show you exactly how to do it. All right, so I'm gonna set these aside and put these back up here, okay? And so let me show you a couple of the luxury items that I think are pretty fantastic that I think you'll enjoy having as well. So Stampin' Up! Now has the Embossing Editions Toolkit. So when you get the toolkit, let me open it and show you what it looks like. So let me just kind of pull this out. All right. So there's the toolkit. So what I like about this is it has an anti-static tool. We also call it the embossing buddy. It's full of powder, and so it helps remove the static or oils, that are on the paper, so that the embossing powder doesn't stick to it. So that's why I love this little powder tool or embossing buddy. Now it also has a paintbrush in here, and so this is to remove any excess embossing powder that might end up on your project. And then the tweezers. Oh yeah, the tweezers are fantastic. They're going to help you hold those small pieces when you're using the heat tool, and also make sure that you don't get your little fingers burned or too toasty. All right, so this here is pretty fantastic, and I think this is my most favorite part. It's an embossing tray with a funnel, and this is what we call a funnel here. This is where your embossing powder, once you sprinkle it on your project, you can actually tap it back into your embossing powder. I don't know if bin's not the right container. That's the right word I'm looking for. So that is our fantastic new additions tool. And so I wanted to kind of show you what I was talking about. So this was a project that I had done earlier. And so this is your funnel that I had shown you, right? And you can kind of get all that embossing powder down towards the end. And then you need your container. And I try to do it over, and actually, let me just go ahead and grab a piece of scrap paper to put down too, because if any of it, comes out on me, then I can certainly dab it, kind of put it back into my container. So look at that. Oh yeah, that's awesome. So there's no waste. So that is pretty fantastic. And you can see it all just went right back into, and I can kind of work it and use my brush and bring some more of that down. All right. So that is another wonderful luxury item that, I just think is fantastic. So let's go ahead and start, let's get embossing. So again, you're going to need your Versamark. And so the first thing that you need to do is add Versamark, because you need this cardstock to be sticky so that it holds that embossing powder. So I've got my Versamark, and I'm just going to show you on a big piece of cardstock. This way you can see the melting process and how fantastic it is. Because there are a couple of things. If you don't get good coverage on this paper, well, then your embossing powder might not stick very well. You might not get a nice, good, good coverage, if you will, with that embossing powder. So you definitely want to make sure that you get this covered really, really well. Now, sometimes if I feel like my Versamark might need a little bit of a re-inker, I do add maybe a little bit more just to make sure that it's good and inky before I emboss. So I'm going to use clear embossing powder. This is one of my favorite things to do. And because I'm not sure if this is white or clear, I'm not going to use my tool today. I'm just going to, well, actually I will. I'll use this other one, because I'll use this other one. There we go. So here we go. This is clear embossing powder, and I'm just going to sprinkle this over the top, okay? So I'm adding my clear embossing powder, and I'm getting good coverage on this because I did add a bit of re-inker in my Versamark, okay? So I'm just going to set that aside with my clear embossing powder. And now I have my little tweezers, which I think are pretty fantastic. And you see how my finger may have gotten some of that off. So you have to be really careful. You just have to be really, really careful. Now, before I go any further with my heat tool, we have two settings here. We have a low, which is number 1, which is going to dry ink. And then we have a number 2, which is going to melt your embossing powder. So I'm going to put that on number 2. And let me show you, hopefully as you can see, as soon as this starts kind of drying or melting. So there we go, there's the magic. And so what's happening right now is the embossing powder is melting. And so right over here to the end, this was a little bit of the white that I had on my scrap paper from showing you earlier. So the rule of thumb is make sure you've got a clean space so that you don't get multicolors. But I can still use this piece of cardstock for sure, and I could cut that end right off if I didn't want that on there. So watch how that melts. It's so cool. And so, I like to just kind of follow it. I just like to follow the embossing powder as it melts. And so if the embossing powder starts to brush off when you're finished, well, then that means that you didn't totally melt it. And so that's why it would brush off. Or you didn't have enough sticky on there to hold it. So that would be a couple of the reasons why the embossing powder doesn't stick. And you can see a difference there. Can you see the difference? Let me shut this off for just 1 second. Can you see the difference there? In this is kind of sort of melted, not melted, sort of melted, and melted. So you can kind of see the difference in the shine, I think. So here, let's go ahead and finish this off. And then we'll move on to an image. So this, if you're wondering what color this cardstock is, it's actually Highland Heather. Absolutely a beautiful, beautiful color in the Stampin' Up! Family of colors. And so one of my favorite techniques is called double embossing. And I did this for the Creative 8 retreat, and I think I've also shared it on BrandysCards. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm not going to do it for you today because you can go back and find that video. But what I am going to show you is how beautiful the cards turned out. So this would make a beautiful card base. Well, it would be beautiful as a card background, right? How pretty is that? Such a beautiful shine, right, and shimmer. So here, you can also put it inside of an embossing folder and run it through your embossing machine, and then you get this beautiful double texture. So in a sense, you're heat embossing, melting embossing powder, and then you're dry embossing, which adds the texture to that cardstock. So you get this really cool double whammy, if you will, double effect. So here's another one. So it just looks so lovely. Oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. So I love this, and it's something that you can try. And this tutorial is on BrandysCards, I believe. So there is a video tutorial on that. Okay, so I am going to brush off my little grid paper there before I move on and show you a couple of other things. So here's our stamp, we have that. And so I just showed you how, to emboss on cardstock. You saw the embossing powder melt. So it melts beautiful. It's a fun process. It is so much fun. So if you haven't tried it, you really must give this a try. So fun. Now remember, there's lots of different embossing powders. There's matte embossing powders, there's colored embossing powders, there's metallics. There's the basics. There's white, clear, and white, clear, and black. So there are so many different things that you can do. There's fine embossing powder. There's like thicker embossing powder. Oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless. But I just recommend just grabbing a embossing powder. And I generally kind of gravitate to my white and to my clear. So I'm going to show you what a couple of the other colors look like, and then we're going to move on to another idea that I had. So here is black. So basically what I did is I just wanted to kind of give you, just show you kind of what we have here at Stampin' Up. So this is just a basic black. Okay, so same process. I inked it up with Versamark. I stamped my flower or my leaf, and then I took my black embossing powder and I embossed that in black. This one is silver. Oh, isn't that beautiful? So this one is silver on white. So that is silver, and this one I believe is copper. So there is a beautifully embossed copper piece that you can do as well. I love these metallics. Oh, and especially for the holidays. I mean, how fantastic is that for the holidays? So this one's gold. I believe that one is the gold color. And then because I didn't think you could see white on white, I grabbed some polished pink and I embossed the white on the polished pink. So I thought that would be a little bit easier for you to see. And so the next one here is actually clear. So check that out. So let me show you the difference here, and that's black on polished pink and silver. So just lots of fun options, but let me show you one more thing. So if I were to take, so when I mentioned earlier that Versamark gives you that tone on tone. So check this out. So here is my Versamark. I'm going to ink it up, and actually, you know what? Hang tight. So I'm going to ink that up, and then I'm just going to stamp it straight down, straight up. Okay. So there is my tone on tone. So that's Bermuda Bay, and it looks as though I've stamped it in Bermuda Bay. but I have not. And so that will dry and it will just be that beautiful tone on tone. Or I could take my embossing buddy, and if I want to add that extra bit of shine, I could ink up my stamp again, okay, Versamark, stamp it straight down, and now I'm going to use clear embossing powder. Now what I'm also going to do, let's say you don't have one of these fantastic tools. Not to worry. Take a piece of scrap paper and it works just as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle that embossing powder right over that cardstock. And I'm going to tap it off, maybe give it a couple flicks, maybe blow it. Again, that's what this paintbrush is for. If I have any little pieces that weren't supposed to be on there, I can just kind of brush it off, right? But the other nice thing is just a piece of scrap paper, kind of fold it, get it all to the center, and just tap it back in your little bin, your little container there. So if you don't have the additional funnel tool, not to worry, you can make your own with a piece of scrap paper. So let's just go ahead and heat this because we're melting embossing powder. We're going to go to number 2. And I find that I like to kind of hold it up. I find that it does dry a little bit faster for me. So I just kind of hold it up a wee bit, and you can kind of see that melting. Oh, it's so beautiful. Such a beautiful shine. And so that is the beauty of embossing. So check this out. So here you have one, this is tone on tone, and then you have one that's been embossed. So you get that beautiful raised, shiny image. Okay, so another thing I want to point out is more, generally you need these pigment inks in order to emboss. However, our Stampin' Up! Ink pads can get pretty darn juicy. So if you have a juicy ink pad, you can certainly emboss on that, okay? So I'm going to show you. I've got Cherry Cobbler here. I'm going to stamp Cherry Cobbler, a Stampin' Up! Ink pad, which is water-based, right? Dye-based. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you how beautifully that embosses. Now, if you give this a try at home and your ink pads aren't super inky, or maybe you have the old firm foam, or not firm foam, the old felt pads, it probably will not work. You're going to need to make sure that you've got a good and juicy stamp pad. But if you do, you can absolutely emboss in colors, right? If you don't have that color embossing powder. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's Cherry Cobbler, and I have a piece of basic white. I'm going to open up my Cherry Cobbler, and instead of Versamark, we're going to set him aside, and I'm going to ink it up here in Cherry Cobbler. So let's just get a good ink up there in Cherry Cobbler, and oh, I better use my embossing buddy. Kind of tap on there, embossing buddy. I like that guy. He's a little powder pal. All right, so here we go. I'm going to stamp it straight down, straight up. Whew. Let me try again. I didn't do that very good. I didn't ink it up well enough, or I have some embossing powder on my thing. So let me just grab a different scrap paper because I think that is actually what happened. So let's just go ahead and get that good and inked up here, or powdered up. And so let me just ink that up, and we are going to give that a good push down. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Now, because this is not a pigment ink, you can't dilly-dally. No wasting time. You've got to get in there and you've got to get that embossing powder added to it. But you can see that there's a full coverage and that the embossing powder has stuck to that image. So that means that I've got a nice, good, juicy ink pad. I'm going to grab my tweezers and move my embossing powder out of the way because I have definitely blown it and been like, oh, rats. So you want to just be careful there. So here we go. We're going to heat. This is actually Cherry Cobbler. This is a Cherry Cobbler stamp pad by Stampin' Up! And we are going to get a beautiful image that is embossed. It's raised, and it's going to have that beautiful shine to it. All right, so here we go. Whoa, that's a little close. Let me see here. Let me bring back down. So there is your image. Okay, so let me pull back a little bit. There we go. It was a little. So here we go. So you can see that, that it's nice and it's shiny and it's really, really pretty there. So anyway, that is cherry cobbler ink that I used with the embossing powder. So that is something that you can do as well. All right, now just a couple of things. I do want to show you that I've done the same thing with my Bermuda Bay. And my Bermuda Bay just doesn't have, it needs to be re-inked. Therefore, the image is hardly covered and it's hardly shiny. So there is a difference. And so not all stamp pads are going to work unless it's nice and juicy and it has a lot of ink in it. So I actually did it twice thinking, okay, well, let me try one more time. So again, you just want to make sure that it's good and inked up. Okay, so I think that is it. That is an heat embossing 101. So much fun. It really is a lot of fun. There's so many things that you can do, and here, let me show you one more card that I found as I was creating. Now, I'm going to say the stamp set is no longer available, but I thought this flower was absolutely stunning. And so that flower is just embossed in basic black only. And it just absolutely gives this stunning, presents itself in such a stunning way when it was embossed in that black embossing powder. So that's what I love about embossing, is it can take your project from awesome to like over the top. So I just think that's super cool and really a fun technique. So if you like my video today and you found it helpful or resourceful, please be sure to click the like button, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to Brandy's Cards. I have a whole beginner video series that, my hope is to inspire others to craft and not to be afraid of giving some of these things a try. There's this world of crafting that is so amazing, and I have found it's brought me so much joy and so many of you. So my hope is that you jump in, give it a try, and let me know how it goes. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need anything. And if you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, please be sure to reach out. You can find me at brandyscards.com/contact. And there you can send me your email, and I'd love to send you a set of complimentary catalogs. I can answer any questions you have, and in hopes of earning your business and getting you on your crafting way, your stamping way. And if you're one of my current customers, I just want to say thank you. I'm so grateful that you're here. I hope you too found this video super helpful, and I love that you stay in touch with me. So thank you for that, and thank you for your business. So until next time, happy stamping. Bye now.